3 months ago, Amazon Games gave me a phone call to say, would I come down to London and check out Blue Protocol to see and give my input on the westernized version of the game? And I said, hey, yes, but do you know I'm not a big anime fan?
Oh, no. I've tried your animation. I don't like it. It's fine.
To which they said, perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for, because the anime stuff is fantastic, but underneath it is still an MMO, and we would love your insight on that. And I said, awesome. Can I bring a team because I have that? And they said, yes. So me and Nups, with a combined wealth of like 30 plus years of MMO experience across a whole bunch of games, and of course Nups is a sponsored virtual race car driver, a lot of good gamers here, went down to London into a secret underground booth where there were trains going overhead, in order to sit down with not only one of the big cheeses beside Amazon Games to talk about Blue Protocol, but to actually play it on multiple characters. Let's go. There are always concerns when a big Eastern game is coming into the Western market. We had it with Lost Ark, and we've had it with other things, and I'm going to ask all those hard-hitting questions. We're going to talk about the monetization, we're going to talk about the grinding, and how they are adapting it over to the West, and certainly including our feedback there. We got to sit down with one of the head honchos at Amazon Games, who is directly involved with the development in order to flesh these things out for you. So we're going to get to that. Let's start with the first thing they let me do, which was the character creation screen. It is easily the best character creation screen I've ever seen in an MMO. It's phenomenal. There is no other words for it. Even as, again, not a fan of anime, this thing is utterly phenomenal. It's incredible. You have so many screens, so many submenus, where you can even break down how the light hits the iris of your eyes and the color shaders that might go in there, that I can already foresee an absolute huge amount of people looking at this for hours and just spending hours and hours doing it. And have no fears, because they have blended your character perfectly into every single cutscene. What you create in there is what you get to see in the game up close and personal. The actual gorgeousness of this game cannot be understated. It plays beautifully, it looks beautiful, it is everything you'd want to see. And if you are a big anime fan, you're in heaven here. You're absolutely in heaven with what they've put together. I spent at least 15 minutes in the character creation screen checking out every single element, and when I saw, as soon as we got into the game, that my character was there and existed, I was pretty amazed. Usually they're covered by armor, usually they're in the background or something like that, or you kind of get like a slight feel for your character, but this is exactly what I created, and it looked like I was watching a TV show. On that side of it, the story elements are fully created by animation studios, like top notch, and the music is done by very famous anime music artists. It is incredibly well done. It's almost a movie, is what you get to see. The opening cutscene is a absolute testament to that genre, and everything about it fits perfectly. I didn't get to figure out what a Blue Protocol was. That is something they're kind of holding back for now, but it was definitely intriguing as to what was going on there with these mysterious characters coming down and sort of infecting and freeing people and needing to be stopped. All those elements were very intriguing to me, and I will say, as a non-anime fan, I'm going to stress that because I think it's important for this review, is that I was okay with it. I was totally okay with it. I was absolutely fine with what was going on, and I very much look forward to playing through this story, as it's going to be very story focused for one big half of the game, with time gating to release massive chapters of this produced professionally by big animation studios. Like, there's a ton of effort gone into that. So what was my day looking like with Amazon? Well, what they decided to do was break it down into several chapters. We had a allotted time to mess around with character creation, make our character, go into the starting zone and have a look around. Then they gave us another entire time to go up to a higher level zone where we got mounts and things like that to go and do some world exploration. And then for the finale of the day, we were given the opportunity to play a dungeon. We were able to play with other content creators that were there in a little 6-man team to go and experience one of the low-level dungeons that they have on offer in the game. Now, we do know that raids and things are coming, and I think an important note here is that one of my biggest concerns with Blue Protocol is that this game is already out. It's out in Japan, it was releasing in Korea shortly, but the Western version that's going to come with us is not coming out till next year, and I was very concerned as to why that is. In the interview that I got to do with Mike Z, you might remember him, he was the former head of Guild Wars 2, back in Path of Fire and Living Will Season 4, is he explained that the Western audience is different. There's a lot of things we need to do in order to adapt it over to the Western audience and make sure that content's there.
I think there's a couple of things that we're focusing on for the Western version. One is that we're trying to make sure that when we release it, that it's the best possible version that players can get their hands on. Really, a lot of the stuff I'm doing is kind of fine tuning for the Western audience, whether it's on the monetization side or whether it's on some of the kind of the gameplay mechanic sides, things like that. It is a little amusing that like a lot of their core values is very similar to where my background comes from.
Yeah.
The types of games that we were building and the types of players we were trying to go after in terms of building that kind of cooperative world for deep exploration. And removing kill stealing, making it so resource nodes are shared for everyone. That kind of mentality is something that really attached me to this project even the first time I played the game.
We have seen with some of the MMOs that have come out recently is that they're a little undercooked. Those are the words I used regarding to New World. A lot of us in the West look forward to the end game. We want to see what's going on. We want those raids. We want those outdoor world bosses. We want all those elements in our game from the start. We want those things there. And this is one of the things that they're delaying the release for, to make sure it's all there and it's all working perfectly and integrated, and of course that the cash shop has been modified to the west. More on that later. Let's talk about the world zone exploration. So when I got thrown out of the main city, which was again gorgeous and very lively, I then got to go out into the world. First of all, instant cast mounting. Oh, praise be. Praise be. God, I am so over cast times for getting onto mounts. It was immediately noticeable to me. It's like, oh, I could just jump on a mount. Fantastic. And go and explore. And immediately off I did. I wanted to play to my strengths, which is gameplay. Now, I picked various classes to play around on. I focused primarily on the hunter, and Nups focused primarily on the melee. There were other classes we wanted to play, but we just didn't have time to play them all. And I will point out here that this is not a final review of the game by any means. A good MMO review, as many of the times I've spoke to the development studios of MMOs, needs about 100 hours. I think that is like the minimum you need to actually give an MMO a thumbs up or thumbs down. This is really a first impressions of what they've put together for the West. And out in the world, beautiful. I really can't overstate that. It's absolutely gorgeous to go out there. But the gameplay made sense. There is no holy trinity here. Kind of. We're not going to see the typical, this class is a healer, this class is a DPS, this class is a tank. It doesn't really work that way for the most part. Again, more on that when we get to the dungeons. But what you'll find is you have a mix of utility skills which back up everybody as standard. So my hunter, for example, could throw out various healing onto other players. And the way this works without the traditional Holy Trinity model is a lot of enemies have very well telegraphed abilities that will mow you down if you get them wrong. And that's occurring easily into the open world. You'll have to really pay attention to the animation, which thankfully is very easy to read, in order to pick out what is going on to make sure you don't end up flat on your back staring at the stars. So the open world stuff, in the brief time I got to mess around with it, was lovely, and I wanted to see way more of it to see what the extra quests were going to be like. So let's talk about the dungeon then, shall we? So into the dungeon I went with the other content creators that were there and Nups in order to mess around with what was going on, and this is where I get really, really interested in what's going on here, because no Holy Trinity, how are these things going to work? And we actually had a message earlier on from Mike Z to say, hey, just to let you know, this boss is vulnerable from above. So you might want to bring some characters that could double jump because they could do bonus damage from up on high. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a new dynamic on bosses. That's very, very interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing that. So into the dungeon we went. First thing I noticed, destructible environment and environmental hazards that you can utilize on the enemies. It's stuff that you'll all have seen before, explosive barrels, collapsing towers. What I was able to do, of course, was troll some of my friends by waiting for them to jump up on towers and blow the tower up so they would fall down on their face. But what I found very quickly is a lot of positioning stuff. Even though this is a low-level dungeon, which is designed to be beaten and not be super, super difficult, is that you did have to work together as a unit. I liked this element a lot. It showed that you can't just be the solo hero, but everything I saw was fully avoidable, including the major boss attacks. Coming back to that telegraphing with large-scale bosses, you can clearly see, but they still are pretty quick, when that boss is rearing up to put out a huge AoE, or to charge you, or to crunch down on you, and the moving around a lot, especially during the trash, meant that you would be really inefficient. As somebody who's a big fan of organized gameplay, this was intriguing to me. This means there's a lot of coordination needed when you get towards the end game, certainly when you start doing the harder content, to not spend endless amounts of time on trash because somebody stood right far at the back. Enemy came charging, they're all separated out, AoE is now ineffective, the healing is now ineffective because you're all spread out all over the place, and you need to keep a constant awareness of where you are. This dungeon was gorgeous, absolutely wonderful, and the last boss, you can see by Nups, diving on its back, able to be stunned when you utilized those features, bringing its break bar down, allowing you to stun it, give a vulnerability, allowing you to pump more and more damage. Let's talk about the classes while we're in the dungeon then. So I played the Ranger style class, the Hunter style class. And what you can see is I'm also the healer of the group, along with a couple of other players who are putting out off healing. Now, first thing you'll notice is, of course, not everybody, because it's our first time playing, understood a lot of the ground markers that were going on. So you'll actually see me trying to heal people who got hit by mechanics. They're running out of it because they think they're going to get AoE'd. Classic gameplay that you're going to see in a pug. But then when talking to Mike Z, what we found out later is it's the actual character depth that you're going to get to see more of when the challenge rises. I said earlier there's no holy trinity. That's kind of true. However, your characters are designed in such a way for massive modification. This is where the depth of the game is going to come from. Now, I want to preface this by saying I did not get to play with this, but I did get to see the menu with a lot of the choices that were available to me, such as increased threat, being able to help people in different ways, along with things called battle echoes, which will allow you to modify your character even more, means there's a greater amount of synergy here when you start working together as an organized team. Now, let's come back to that, because I feel like people might get worried that this is going to be like a very strict team-based game. Absolutely not. And this is where Mike Z's input came in vital, because as you know, Guild Wars 2, or maybe you don't know, is very, very good at making sure that you can play that game entirely solo. Yet if there is a massive event going on, you can very quickly, and the game supports that, join in even if you don't know what's going on. People can elect to be leaders of those groups, and they take that responsibility very, very highly. Blue Protocol is going to be similar in that vein. When elite enemies do spawn out in the open worlds and the call goes out in order to get in there and deal with this massive enemy, the game is going to naturally and organically draw people together and allow you to work together as a team, despite the fact that you're a solo player.
From beginning to end, you can play the storyline by yourself. Yeah. And so when you're out there, even if I'm not in a party, I'm going to be more effective when there are other players around, and that's the way that the open world is designed. And then on top of that, yes, they do actually have some content, especially right now. There's some more elite bosses that will show up in the open world, very similar to the event system. That is, well, once there's a marker on there, once there's kind of a shout, players are going to be drawn to this. And the game just naturally supports this idea of organic play between people who may be more single player minded and more group minded players to come together and tackle some really big challenges.
While you will, of course, have the option to join guilds and get more organized if this is a game for you, if you want to be that solo guy out in the world, that is absolutely fine. And that was very, very representative when it came to modifying your skills with an organized team to say, hey, we want that guy to hold more threat, this guy to do more healing, these guys to do more synergetic DPS with each other, but absolutely not necessary in the pug world. If you're going to be pugging, your character is going to do what your character is going to do, and that's absolutely fine as well. Both of these elements coexist together, and I really look forward to seeing how that plays out. I just mentioned there being solo out in the world and doing all those kinds of things. And this makes people a little worried about grind. Now, grind is something that the East, who have already had the game out, have complained about a little bit. So we brought that up in interviews. And I'm actually going to let Mike Z answer this question as to how they intend this to play out.
Some of the feedback from the players was, hey, this feels like it's not rewarding enough, or it doesn't feel like it's respecting my time as a player as much. And so the dev team absolutely heard that. This was also feedback that we were kind of giving to them as well in terms of either user research studies or market research studies or even internal play tests, just about like being aware of kind of that global perspective that we were talking about earlier. And they took the time to focus on it. And so that was one of the reasons why they actually ended up pushing out a little bit longer than they were expecting, was because they were listening to the player feedback and then taking direct action against that. This is where like the free-to-play nature of it kind of, I think, is in their favor. It's like they're focusing specifically on, it's for us, especially in the West, we're looking at a fun and fair monetization model that it's not, complete random, that we are adding kind of stopgaps on the back end to make sure that, if you're spending money, you at some point will be guaranteed getting an item that you're actually looking for, or the season pass model, or the founders packs, the things that we're doing. Like, generally speaking, the core value is we don't want you, if you're purchasing and I'm not, to have a huge differential in terms of what our power or our accomplishments is. The game is based around skill, and we want to honor that as much as possible, and bring that to the Western players in that way.
Fantastic news. Yes, this is what we wanted to see, especially with the mantra that a lot of modern MMOs are going with, is there is other things people want to do and they don't want to feel like their life is committed to your game. It can actually be an off-putting element, and Blue Protocol is going that way. Similar with their monetization model. Of course, in the East, they're kind of okay with a bit more grinding and a little bit more RNG in their loot boxes, not particularly over here. And that feedback has been heard in the East. We did our research before we went to talk about Blue Protocol and play it, it, and they have been some complaints. It's like, hey, I had to grind really too long to get this thing, and I don't really like it. When talking to Mike Z about that as well, he said, yeah, we've heard that feedback. That is something we're absolutely changing. We're like, we do not want people to feel that way. We want people to be able to come in, get the benefit of the game, and then go and play these big blockbusters that might be coming out or their other games and not feel like beholden to us. It is a free-to-play game, which is supported by monetization. And they're also going to add in, if you're chasing a certain skin, yes, there will be boxes to try and RNG it for cheap. However, if you don't get it, that's okay too, because we're going to give you a secondary currency where you can specifically buy the thing that you are after. So you're never going to be left wanting on that side, which fits far more into the Western style of doing things and seems, at the moment, completely fair. Especially they're going to put in stopgaps so you can't go too far or too crazy with buying and buying and buying and buying, which is not what we want to see in any MMOs that are coming to the markets these days. So, what is it we're going to look forward to when this game comes out in 2024? Well, we're looking to have a lot of raids and a lot of things we expect. You can see some previews of them on YouTube. A lot more is coming, which is why, again, it is delayed in the West to make sure all that content is in, which is exactly what people like me who play in the Western market absolutely want from this game, as well as the elite depth. Are there things I would like to see after our brief play? Sure, I would like to play way more with the characters. There are characters, we got ones with like preset skills and things like that without being able to mess around with them, and yeah, there were some skills that I was like, okay, I don't particularly enjoy this one. And I think from what I can tell is each of the characters is very, very unique, so finding the one that suits you is going to be a bit of a trial and error process. I wanted to next try the super quick blade to find out how that one goes, but I didn't have time to do that, and that is something I'm looking forward to when I come in. There were some skills that my character had that felt like they were ineffective, and I wanted to mess them around. Or perhaps Nupsy's feedback on this is one of his huge abilities just had a bit of a long wind up that kind of took him out of the gameplay for a little while, and he wanted to switch it up and mess it around. That's what I'm looking forward for Blue Protocol, is to dive into these classes, really find the one that suits me perfectly, and see about this depth that Mike Z talked about. Is like, where is it when I can adjust myself to playing with my teammates so we can put together some super cool fun teams and defeat some really hard bosses. I'm looking forward to this one. I was surprised. The anime stuff was obviously going to be something that didn't directly appeal to me, but what we found underneath is seemingly a pretty decent MMO. One thing I'm really happy about is the delay. This is a good idea. Make sure it fits the mold that you want to target over in the West. Make sure it's ready, make sure it's good, and using the feedback, and this is kind of something they were okay with, is like using the feedback. The game is already out in Japan, it'll be out in Korea. Let's make sure we see what they're dealing with, and then we can adapt it over to the West. They did say they want to keep the games pretty much on parity with some slight differences, because obviously it's hard, otherwise you're developing 3 games, but there are adjustments that need to be made, and I'm so happy that they actually listened to our feedback. It was great to sit there, play through it, use our experience to say, hey, what about this? What about that? And they were very open to that. So we'll be looking forward to this in 2024. I'm very excited to get under the hood and see where this game takes us. And of all the new MMOs that are coming out, this is the one that seems to be appealing to me the most so far. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to Amazon for giving us this time to go down. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.